Good evening, and welcome to The Central Question. Tonight, we are tackling a profound and deeply consequential issue that sits at the heart of our national identity and future. The question is this: should public education, from the first day of kindergarten to the last day of university, be a fully state-funded public good, completely free for every student? This isn't merely a debate about economics. It's a conversation about our societal values, our belief in equality of opportunity, and the kind of future we wish to build. To help us navigate this complex topic, I'm joined by two distinguished guests with compelling, yet opposing, viewpoints. Dr. Ben Carter, a respected professor of sociology, argues passionately that free education is a fundamental human right and a necessary investment in our nation's progress. And Dr. Evelyn Reed, a leading economist, brings a different perspective, cautioning that such a policy, while well-intentioned, could be fiscally unsustainable and potentially damaging to educational quality. Welcome to you both. Dr. Carter, let's begin with you. Please, make your opening case for why universal free education is the right path forward.
Thank you, Isabel. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to frame this discussion on the principle that I believe should guide us. This is fundamentally an issue of social justice and human rights. A person's access to knowledge and their opportunity to develop their intellect should never be predetermined by their family's economic standing. It's as simple as that. In our current system, we are, whether we admit it or not, telling the brightest minds from our poorest communities that their aspirations have a price tag. And it's a price tag they simply cannot afford. This isn't just profoundly unfair on an individual level. It's a tremendous and unacceptable waste of our nation's human capital. Education is without question the most powerful engine for social and economic mobility that exists. By making higher education universally free, we would systematically dismantle the financial barriers that perpetuate intergenerational cycles of poverty. Think about the society we could create. A society where every child, regardless of the circumstances of their birth, has a genuine, tangible opportunity to become a doctor, an engineer, a scientist, or an artist. The long-term economic benefits of such a policy are undeniable and well documented. A more educated workforce is a more innovative, more adaptable, and more productive workforce. This leads directly to greater economic growth, new industries, and consequently, higher tax revenues that would, in the long run, more than justify the initial public investment. We must shift our perspective. We have to stop viewing education as a personal expenditure and start treating it as the essential public good. It truly is an investment in our collective future, just as vital as our national infrastructure or our public healthcare systems. It is the very cornerstone of a truly equitable, prosperous, and progressive society.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. A very powerful case for education as a public good. Dr. Reed, your opening statement, please. How do you respond?
Thank you for having me, Isabel. Dr. Carter's vision is certainly an appealing one, and his ideals are admirable. However, it's a vision almost entirely detached from fiscal and economic reality. The first, most immediate, and most unavoidable question is one I must insist we confront directly. Who pays for it? The word free is a dangerous misnomer. It is not free. It's simply paid for collectively by the taxpayers. We're discussing an astronomical increase in public expenditure, a financial burden so large that it would necessitate one of two disastrous outcomes: either a substantial and painful rise in taxes for everyone, and that includes the low and middle income families this policy is meant to help, or it would require drastic, irresponsible cuts to other essential public services. Are we prepared to sacrifice funding for healthcare, infrastructure maintenance, or Social Security to pay for this? That is the real-world trade-off we would be facing. Furthermore, this policy carries a significant risk of causing a severe decline in the quality of education itself. Imagine a sudden, massive influx of students into universities, which is the intended outcome, but without a proportional, guaranteed increase in funding for faculty salaries, modern facilities, and essential academic resources. It's a recipe for absolute disaster. It would lead to overcrowded lecture halls, overworked and underpaid professors, and a general dilution of academic standards and rigor. The intrinsic value of a university degree could be severely diminished, which would ironically hurt the very students the policy aims to empower. Finally, we cannot afford to ignore the principle of personal investment. When students contribute financially to their own education, even through manageable, income-contingent loans, they have a tangible stake in their own success. This fosters a sense of responsibility, discipline, and commitment that is crucial for succeeding in a demanding academic environment. To remove this element entirely would be a grave mistake, creating a system that is not only fiscally unsustainable, but also potentially less effective at producing motivated, successful graduates.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. You've laid out the central economic arguments very clearly. Let's move into our first round of rebuttal. Dr. Reed, Dr. Carter frames this as a long-term investment. While you highlight the immediate and significant costs, how do you respond to his argument that a more educated populace would eventually generate more than enough tax revenue to cover that initial expense, creating a net positive for the economy in the long run?
That argument relies on a highly optimistic and speculative economic model that is far from guaranteed. There's simply no certainty that the increased tax revenue would materialize in the way proponents suggest, or that it would be sufficient to cover the enormous, ongoing annual costs of the program. It represents a colossal gamble with public funds. I must also take issue with the comparison of higher education to a public road. Everyone benefits from and uses public roads, making them a clear public good. A university degree, however, provides a substantial and direct private benefit to the individual in the form of significantly higher lifetime earnings. It is therefore entirely reasonable to expect that individual to contribute to the cost of acquiring that benefit. Moreover, we must be realistic about the unintended consequences. Making university degrees, quote, free could severely distort the labor market. It might lead to a chronic oversupply of graduates in some popular academic fields, creating widespread underemployment, while simultaneously causing a critical shortage of skilled workers in essential vocational trades. We could find ourselves in a bizarre situation with thousands of unemployed philosophy graduates, while being unable to find qualified plumbers, electricians, or mechanics, professions that are equally vital to a functioning economy.
Dr. Carter, your response?
Dr. Reed's narrow focus on private benefit completely misses the larger societal picture. The collective benefits of a highly educated population are immense and well documented. We're talking about lower crime rates, better public health outcomes, more robust civic engagement, and critically, greater innovation, which drives the economy for everyone. To suggest that the current system of targeted aid is sufficient is to willfully ignore the reality that thousands of students face. Scholarships and grants, while helpful, rarely cover the full cost of attendance. They fail to account for the crushing burden of living expenses, rent, food, transportation. This hidden cost is precisely what deters so many talented students from low-income families. They are not afraid of the academic work. They are terrified of graduating with a mountain of debt. As for the issue of quality, it absolutely does not have to decline. Quality can be rigorously maintained and even enhanced through strong government accreditation systems, performance-based funding models for institutions, and by looking at the successful models in countries like Germany, Finland, and Norway, where free higher education coexists with world-class academic standards.
Dr. Carter, you bring up those successful European models. However, as critics frequently point out, many of those countries have significantly higher overall tax rates than we do. How would you propose funding such a monumental policy shift without placing the unsustainable burden on the average taxpayer that Dr. Reed fears?
That is a fair and important question, but it is not an insurmountable obstacle. The funding can be sourced through a strategic combination of progressive tax reform, ensuring that major corporations and the wealthiest individuals finally pay their fair share, and by systematically reallocating public funds from inefficient or outdated government programs. Every year, we spend billions on subsidies for industries that are no longer competitive or are even harmful to the environment. That money could, and should, be redirected towards the most valuable investment possible, our own human capital. And I must challenge Dr. Reed's assertion about personal investment. The notion that financial debt is a positive motivator is frankly a dangerous and outdated myth. Overwhelming evidence shows that the immense stress of student debt is a primary driver of anxiety and mental health crises among students. This stress actively hinders their academic performance and limits their career choices after graduation. The primary motivation for a student should be a passion for knowledge and a desire for self-improvement, not the fear of a financial obligation that will haunt them for decades.
Dr. Reed?
Citing European models is a common but fundamentally flawed comparison. These countries have vastly different population sizes, more homogeneous societies, different economic structures, and, most importantly, vastly different cultural attitudes toward taxation and the role of the state. We cannot simply copy and paste their policies into our unique context and expect the same results. Dr. Carter's proposal to fund this through quote, progressive tax reform is a well-worn euphemism for significant tax hikes that would inevitably creep down to affect the middle class, not just the ultra-wealthy. It would stifle investment and slow economic growth. I believe there is a much more pragmatic and effective middle way. Instead of a complete, disruptive, and risky overhaul of our entire system, we should focus on strengthening what we already have. This means significantly expanding federal grants, making our income-contingent loan programs more generous and far easier to navigate, and investing heavily in our nation's excellent community colleges to provide an affordable, high-quality 2-year pathway to a 4-year degree. This approach targets support directly where it is most needed, expanding access without compromising quality or risking fiscal catastrophe.
We are nearing the end of our time. I'd like to give you both one final minute to make your closing statements. Dr. Reed, please begin.
In conclusion, while the goal of making education accessible to all is one I wholeheartedly share, the proposal for completely free university education is a well-intentioned but fiscally reckless fantasy. It willfully ignores the astronomical costs. It seriously threatens the quality of our world-renowned academic institutions, and it removes the important element of personal responsibility from the equation. The wiser path forward is to pursue pragmatic, targeted reforms that strengthen our existing system. Let us provide robust, generous support for the students who are truly in need, rather than creating an inefficient, unsustainable universal program that would ultimately bankrupt the state and devalue the very degrees we seek to promote.
Thank you. Dr. Carter, your final thoughts.
Tonight, we've discussed costs and benefits, taxes and models. But at its very heart, this debate is about what we value most as a society. Do we value a system that perpetuates advantage and rewards existing wealth? Or do we value a system that seeks out and rewards talent, intelligence, and hard work, no matter where it comes from? A nation's greatest resource is not its industries or its military might. It is the collective mind of its people. By refusing to invest fully in them, we are actively choosing to limit our own potential as a country. Free, universal public education is not a cost. It is the single most important investment we can possibly make in a more prosperous, more innovative, and more just future for every single one of our citizens.
Thank you both, Dr. Carter and Dr. Reed, for a robust, enlightening, and deeply thoughtful debate. You have given all of us a great deal to consider. Should education be a right, free for all, or a shared responsibility between the individual and the state? That, for now, remains the central question. Good evening.